Hi, my name is Marcus Walton, and for my Drama 30 oral requirement, I'm going to discuss the sociological, historical, and political aspects of the films American Me and Me Vida Loca. So, starting with the sociological aspect, in both of these films, it is apparent that living situations in the barrios are not an ideal place for kids to grow up. In American Me, small gangs are created for street cred and respect, and although small, the consequences of the decisions they make in the gang lead them down a negative path towards what I call lifelong gangs, or just a premature grave. In Mi Vida Loca, the girls' gangs work in similarity to the men. You are jumped in, you have to earn street cred and just earn respect, but you are not always playing the tough guy role, especially when they're in front of their boyfriends. The similarities in both these films are that in neither living situation of these kids, male or female, do they have a guidance or do they have guidance or a real like authority figure that cares about their future. I have a quote. In quote, it is also striking because the catalyst for the walkouts, high dropout rate, crumbling schools, lack of Mexican American teachers still resonate today. End quote. That's a cited source that I'll give at the end of the presentation. But that quote is from a report talking about the history of Chicano civil rights movement in the United States during the 60s, roughly around the time of these two films that they take place. But what is important is the fact that the quote states these same issues are still a problem for Chicano youth today. This leads into the overall problem, which is the cycle for Chicano youth, the process of dropping out, joining gangs, and just dying off. And it continues to recycle and just over and over again. And that's also demonstrated in both American Me, with Santana's younger brother representing the gang, and in Mi Vida Loca, with the youth taking out a rival gang leader for no reason. I'll also go into more detail about that in the historical aspect. Moving on to the political aspect, going back to the Zoot Suit era shown in American Me, Latino youth were targeted by authorities and given no respect, literally fending for themselves because of their new style and culture. During this time, Chicanos had little to no civil rights, and in Los Angeles, the home of both of these films, this caused huge problems affecting the success of Latino youth. The scene where the white cop approaches and confronts Santana and Julie after the party when they were just talking, he asks, end quote, if either of them have been to prison, end quote, when it is apparent that he is targeting Santana. Santana answers honestly, and for that is searched by the cop with no hesitation, and the cop finds drugs and immediately books him and takes him back to prison. This is important politically in the film because it shows the power of law enforcement. Santana didn't stand a chance. I mean, regardless of him being honest, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just having a conversation, and he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And because of the way that he looks, the color of his skin, it just put a target on him. And as short of a time that he had out of prison, he was right back inside of prison, like he never left. A different take on politics that I thought about could be the politics inside the prison amongst the different gangs. Because in prison, the politics applied to normal law-abiding citizens seem to be tossed out of the window, in my opinion. In American Me, 3 different gangs were shown at Folsom Prison. So you have the Black Guerrilla Family, you have the Aryan Brotherhood, and you have La M, the Mexican Mafia. These gangs lived by certain laws, and these laws were constantly toyed with and disregarded by the different gangs. For instance, you never mess with the supply and demand of drugs. And in prison, there is only one way to deal with a problem, and that is to kill whoever's messing your deal up. You just kill them off. I mean, that's all they can do. And that's just like what La M did to a member of the Black Guerrilla Family. These laws could also be broken amongst members of the same gang. For instance, La M killed off a few of their own members who were going against what the leaders wanted. But the biggest rule of them all that I got out of the film was that once you are in the gang, especially one like La M, you're in the gang for life, and that's it. Like the only way out is death, or like you being in a box. There's this was the final consequence for both Little Puppet and Santana, who were both tired of gang life and just wanted a better life and just to like forget about it, you know. And when oh yeah. And when comparing this to the politics displayed in Mi Vida Loca, the viewer gets a similar but different look for a women's gang perspective. There's one instance where Whisper gets in trouble with the police and the cops illegally took her photo, although she is a minor. And this is important because although she wasn't arrested, they had no right to take her picture, which targets her as a criminal in the eyes of the cops in that area. This also just shows how the cops look at Latino youth in the barrios. I mean, they just look at them as if they're just like a bunch of hoodlums. And like, that's not right. Alright, so moving on to the the historical aspects. The overall problem with Chicano youth is that there is a never-ending cycle that took place during the 50s, but continues to take place up until today. And in both films, we catch a glimpse at the lives of Chicano youth and how family, older siblings, and relatives overly influence their lives. In American Me, Santana gets into prison from a juvenile age, and his younger brother grows to only know him through a glass window at prison. The issue is that Santana has a very big influence on his younger brother, and although he was locked away, his brother saw him as a role model and wanted to be just like him, which was a gangster. As discussed on ericdigest.org, the barrios spawn these gangs. Well, the barrios that spawn these gangs are still around, and so is the poverty, the stressed families, and the conflicts of schooling and culture identity. And the children of these new immigrant families are pulled into the cholo life like a lot faster than they used to be. And these are facts that tell the story of this harsh and ill-fated cycle for Latino youth. Another issue with these gangs is that they usually do not have jobs, so in their free time they do drugs and drink alcohol, leading to loco acts. And a loco act is just acting in a crazy fashion, and it usually involves alcohol, drugs, and they just go and do something crazy, loco. This type of loco lifestyle was shown in Vida Loca when El Duran's gang did a drive-by shooting attempt on Sleepy of Echo Park in retaliation against Sleepy murdering El Duran. Something different and positive that came out of Mi Vida Loca is when Giggles is released from prison. Similar to how Santana's younger brother looked up to him, all the teenage girls of Echo Park looked up to Giggles. Upon being released, she surprised the girls when she wasn't as gangster as they had believed, and she was actually trying to promote getting jobs and starting a better life and a non-gang affiliated life. This is important in contrasting the two films and how prison life has affected the males in prison and the females in prison. It also separates the strength of male gangs compared to female gangs. For one, when Santana got out of prison, he was still a gangster and had prison mentalities. Keep in mind he had been in prison a lot longer than Giggles. And this was evident when, instead of having romantic sexual relations with Julie, he ends up, raping her, and he did it like he would do to a man in prison. When comparing this to Giggles, who upon release was an entirely different woman, who knew there was much more to life than the street life, and in order to be able to progress in the world, she'd need to make something of herself so she could give her kids a brighter future. Going back to Santana's time in prison, after being out, he did find a change of heart and wanted out of the gang, which led to his death. This contrasts with the female gang of Mi Vida Loca because Giggles, not that she wanted out of the gang, but she wanted a better life and was trying to promote that for all the girls. But at the end of the day, the other girls accepted her change instead of just kicking her out of the gang or hurting her in any way. Another big difference in the films is the fact that the girls of Echo Park would go to parties with rival barrios. This just shows how small these gangs were and how little of a role the women played in the violence and brutality of these gangs. So overall, in conclusion, male gangs, what I get from them are that they're a lot more violent. They're a lot stricter, and once you're in those gangs, those big Aryan Brotherhood type gangs, there's no getting out of it. Like, you're in for life. Just like JD said to Santana, like, you're becoming soft, man. So then they killed him off. Compared to the women's gangs, who, it's almost like a teenage thing for women. Like, they're in the gang and then they're out of the gang, and they have to watch over their kids because their boyfriends are dead or in prison or off somewhere. So those are the differences that I get from the two films. And yeah, and I'll put the work cited that I did use under the description in the post. Yep.